Oh, yes. Hello, my friends, and welcome to this, another edition of Rotoworld Live, served by Applebee's. As always, I am Josh Norris, joined by John Daigle, joined by Hayden Winks, joined by Patrick Bennett Doherty. Some say internationally known Patrick Bennett Doherty. Gentlemen, what a wild, we were talking about this before we hit live, weird slate we have coming up, some massive totals, some important news items that are going to be impacting your fantasy lineups. Again, if you're tuning in, thank you so much. Get your questions in on Periscope, on Twitch, on YouTube, all that good stuff. We have some great production help feeding them to us, and we'll get to them throughout the show. We thought this week, though, since there are some massive totals, some games you want a lot of exposure to, I'll go to Hayden, I'll go to Daigle to get some games that they have maybe the most investment in. Hayden, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so I think the Cardinals-Seahawks game is the game of the week, but we already know where we're going with those pieces. So I want to talk about the Texans versus Packers, which is also a game that I expect to shoot out a little bit because we have to go over the Aaron Jones replacement news. So I'm sure everyone's going to have a lot of Jamaal Williams questions. I'm viewing him as kind of like a boom bust, like RB1-2. I think he has like top 5, top 6 potential, but you have like an Ian Rappaport report come out about like AJ Dillon possibly getting involved. So there's not quite the floor that we're typically looking at as like a top 12 fantasy running back, but I think that he certainly has that potential. And on the other side of the ball, we have who's going to be covering Jair Alexander, who's probably the best corner in the league right now. Is he going to be covering Will Fuller or Brandon Cooks? That has some implications. And then I think finally the other guy is, I think Marquez Valdes-Scantling, if you're looking for like a wide receiver 4, I think he has a lot of big play potential this week too.
I'm a little nerved out and awestruck by that game being just a 3-point spread right now. And that kind of makes me go back and think, well, what does Vegas know that I don't know? Especially with Houston, as we talked about having that game so close against the Titans last week. But I would definitely pick the Packers by at least a touchdown in that game, even without Aaron Jones. Daigle, what about you?
Yeah, so to add to that, A.J. Dillon also, remember, 21 catches across 35 career college games. His target floor, his touch floor, clearly much lower than Jamaal Williams. So I think it's guesswork that we're trying to do here with A.J. Dillon, whereas we know Jamaal Williams is locked into a role, despite what Rap Sheet says. Having said that, I'm also excited about the Panthers and Saints game that I think is going over. Everyone is concerned about Marshawn Lattimore, but remember, even when he's played this year, he's been bad. 15 catches on 19 targets allowed. We can expect that Panthers offense to bounce back in a friendly matchup as opposed to last week's game against a very tough Bears defense. And then I also like the Bills and Jets to sneakily shoot out.
Oh, man.
Remember, this Bills defense also has not been good. Like, this is not a McDermott unit at all. We get Sam Darnold back. Darnold had amazing rapport with Braxton Berrios, who's starting for Jameson Crowder. And also, he finally gets to play with Rashad Perryman, who also looked good last week. So I don't expect the Jets to win, but I think they can put up points on this Bills defense, making Josh Allen keep his foot on the gas. And finally, again, a great matchup for him.
Okay, now it's time to get into your questions. I have my coffee ready. I'm sure everyone else here does as well. We'll be here until 12:45 Eastern, leading up until kickoff, answering your questions. You can get them in the chat, and we'll get to them now. Pat, biggest storyline, I would say, of this weekend, well, one of many, Aaron Jones being out against that Texans defense that Hayden talked about. So here it is. Jamaal Williams or James Robinson? Which way are you leaning in your rankings this week, Pat?
I'm going Jamaal Williams. They laid it out really well, John and Hayden, but I think he's on the RB1-2 borderline, kind of regardless of what the reports are. And of course, they're gonna have to get AJ Dillon more involved today. They want to be a 2-back offense, so it's like not surprising that report is out there. But I mean, a guy they've had almost no faith in so far this season. I don't think he's going to come in and just like be like the touch leader or be the carries leader. So it's like less straightforward than Giovanni Bernard. And there for Joe Mixon is, but I think Jamaal Williams, especially against this Texans run defense, I mean, they're allowing like 170 rushing yards per game, just a flat-out non-existent unit, basically. So Jamaal has some low-end RB1 appeal.
And I do want to bring up, if we can, and I'll zoom in here, Pat's ranking so everyone can see them, just where he has Jamaal Williams.
Oh,
he has him
behind James Robinson, so that's great.
But I think this discourse that you just said, Pat, is important. And Hayden, correct me if I'm wrong, but and I know that Chris Thompson is not playing and Divino Zigbo was the one who's activated, but a lot of James Robinson's touches have been when they're either in neutral or positive game script, correct?
That is true, and I'm kind of expecting the Chargers to be even better than what they have been. They're getting some defensive players back as well, and I'm getting a little bit nervous about James Robinson just because we've seen how low the floor is of this Jaguars offense in general. And then the last note with Jamaal Williams is Texans linebacker Benardrick McKinney is not playing. He's probably their best run-stuffing linebacker as well. So they're already bad, and they're only getting worse.
Smoke signals. Sorry, John. The smoke signal's bad with James Robinson, but the usage is kind of strange. But he has caught at least 4 passes almost every week, which has so far been solidifying his floor in fantasy.
Justin Jones and Melvin Ingram aren't just some defensive players either. Those are two outstanding defenders in the trenches for the Chargers.
Low bar to clear to be the Texans' best linebacker on the field. All right, here we go. We're going to bring back Deontay Johnson in this game. We know he's been missing time, and in his absence, Chase Claypool has stepped up. He's facing, and I would say the game of the week, the Tennessee Titans, whose defense has not been as good as that offense. Daigle, which way are you leaning here? Deontay Johnson, Tyler Boyd, or Brandon Cooks?
I'm going Brandon Cooks here. Remember, the past 2 games with this new regime for the Texans, Brandon Cooks leads the team with a 29% target share. And although there are concerns about Jair Alexander covering him, Brandon Cooks is used in ways that I don't worry about the coverage. Lots of shallow crossers, lots of snaps from the backfield, even in motion as well. And so even if he's not getting deep shots, I think he's pretty safe to be involved every week.
Okay, we'll see on that Tyler Boyd wagon here. Tyler Boyd, we know they're facing the Cleveland Browns, a team that they played in week 2, and that forced Joe Burrow to attempt 61 passes in that game. Hey, we all love that type of volume for fantasy football. Pat, Tyler Boyd or Jerick McKinnon? And McKinnon's facing the New England Patriots, who were awful last week, and the 49ers here are 3-point underdogs.
I could say that Joe Burrow start is one of the all-time great garbage time miracles. This one is really, really weird because I could see Jerick McKinnon's role just not changing at all today, even without Raheem Mostert. I think we kind of talked about this some of the podcasts over the weeks where it seems like the 49ers are a little spooked about Jerick McKinnon on early downs. And even with Jeff Wilson probably going to be active today, I think Jermichael Hasty is going to get like a nice kind of look-see. I couldn't think of a better phrase than that on early downs. And I like Tyler Boyd's catch floor more than Jerick McKinnon's, and I just don't really know how many carries Jerick McKinnon's going to add. So I will actually say Tyler Boyd and feel like not great about it, but I just think Jerick McKinnon could be a huge disappointment today.
Hayden, we're getting a lot of returning guests, as we do always. jpirish58 is one of those on Twitch. Morning, guys. Full point PPR. Corey Davis, who is returning. Tim Patrick, who's kind of taking that Cortland Sutton role, or Demarcus Robinson. I'm leading Tim Patrick here. Hayden, what about you?
I am as well. The one note with the Broncos is they're getting all of their guys back. Melvin Gordon's back. KJ Hamler's back. Noah Fant's back. So it's going to be kind of tough unless Drew Lock becomes like a serviceable starting quarterback to get all these guys involved. But I think that Tim Patrick has the most big play potential. The other note, the Chiefs, they're playing in like 20 degrees and possible snow. So go make sure that the weather's all right if you're looking at some of the Chiefs and Broncos players. I don't think that's like something to like make sure to get all of them out, but I think that you can downgrade the passing game in particular if the conditions are really bad.
By the way, Pat mentioned the Rotoworld Football podcast. Boom. Yeah, I'll zoom in. There we go. All of you out there, if you are watching us now, you should go and download the Rotoworld Football podcast. I mean, we have a tremendous slate every single week, including a Monday morning recap show of every single game that happened on Sunday. We'll watch them so you don't have to. All right, Daigle, here's a difficult one from David Kosc. Half-point PPR, sit one for the flex. So Odell Beckham, Chris Godwin, or Kenyon Drake. Again, sit one of these.
Oh, I think I would sit Beckham. Kenyon Drake's touches are at least there. And I don't think he like sparked up a flame last week against the Cowboys. I think he's still just Kenyon Drake, but also he's going to get 18 plus touches as he continues to do weekly, no matter how badly he performs. And then it comes down to Godwin having the higher catch floor, in my opinion, over Beckham. Pat, do you agree with that? Because it comes down to Beckham and Godwin.
I sadly agree that you got to get Kenyon Drake in there, and that I'm going to bench Odell, which just we have seen no demonstrated target ceiling whatsoever. I don't know. William Jackson III creates a little havoc sometimes. I don't know. I just can't see. Unfortunately, it's got to be Odell.
Another frequent viewer is Charles Johannes. PPR Flex Pat, Robby Anderson or Chase Claypool. And I actually have, boom, your rankings here. That is not the right one. Let's go. Well,
that is the right one.
There we go.
With Mr. Robert Anderson.
You have Robby Anderson at 11, and you have Chase Claypool at 21. So I think the strong lean here for Charles, who has a great fantasy team, is Robby Anderson.
I mean, we're to the point where a bad game for Robby Anderson is 77 yards. And I really hope John is right. I wouldn't be shocked if the Saints defense was a little better coming off the bye. Like they get a few things fixed, but John is not wrong that they've been not good this year, especially against the pass. So hopefully this is a great spot for Robby to get back to what we expect from Robby Anderson. Every week we expect 8 catches and 100 yards from Robby Anderson. Everyone knew that in July and August. So
I don't want to knock Chase Claypool because he really has been amazing, but also no more than 4 targets in any game. He doesn't have an end zone target this year.
Well, he had more than 4 targets in the game where he scored three touchdowns.
Okay, and start. I'm sorry. Yeah. And then of course 4 wide receivers involved today. So it's just one of those. If he fails, we'll understand why. There are a lot of mouths to feed.
Yeah, this week is great at defining what Chase Claypool's role is going to be moving forward. That's really important. I mean, he could be one of the most important fantasy assets as we continue on this season. But if he goes out there with Deontay Johnson back with Juju in the slot and, only gets those 4 targets or 3 targets that Daigle's talking about, we know he can still and has, even when he wasn't a starter, put up big numbers on that small amount of volume. But if he is going to be limited volume, which I just cannot see happening. I mean, I'm starting Chase Claypool with confidence today because I just don't think you can put that special sauce back in the bottle. Hayden, whenever I see a Tyler Higbee question, I have to swing it to you. Japheth Medina, Henry Ruggs or Tyler Higbee in the flex?
Too soon. Henry Ruggs, Tyler Higbee is still questionable with the hand injury, and they're just not running many routes. I mean, he's like top 5 in yards per route run, but like 28 in routes run among tight ends just because the Rams are running the ball a ton, and you have to go Henry Ruggs.
We were talking before the show that Joshua Kelly was going to be a frequent name we would hear, and it's because of that extreme positive game script that the Los Angeles Chargers should have against the Jacksonville Jaguars, a 7.5-point spread in favor of the Chargers. Daigle, Joshua Kelly or Christian Kirk in standard. We finally saw Christian Kirk have a big game last week, and he'll need probably another one in order for Arizona to keep up with Seattle.
And Kirk has an increased 17% target share since week 4, since he returned from injury. The thing is, this is still finally a great spot for Josh Kelly. Everyone's like, oh, he looks so bad. Like, of course he looked bad against the Bucs and the Saints front 7. The one thing those teams do is stop the run. So, of course, in his early down role, he didn't look good. But this one is a primo matchup. And it also helps him, I believe, that Justin Jackson was listed as questionable and is going to play. But the Jaguars front 7 is so giving that easily both could go over 100 with a touchdown today.
Again, as you can tell, we're answering your start-sit questions, helping you set your optimal lineups, get them in on Periscope, on YouTube, on Twitch, and we'll get to them throughout the show. Pat, Melvin Gordon probably needs to have a big game with the Denver Broncos. Facing the Kansas City Chiefs. We know that the Kansas City Chiefs are kind of welcoming people to run against them. We know Melvin Gordon hasn't, had a crystal clean 2 weeks. Let's put it that way. But David Montgomery with the Chicago Bears, it might be weird to say, but they were much more run-oriented with Mitch Trubisky, and they're kind of more pass-oriented right now offensively.
I mean, when you get a franchise quarterback, Super Bowl winning quarterback like Nick Foles, you change the whole offense. With Melvin Gordon and Phil Lindsay, it's weird. There's kind of no longer any daylight between them. And Melvin Gordon had only kind of stayed afloat, like well ahead, partly because of a 43-yard touchdown where the Jets just couldn't stop them in garbage time. That was kind of like the one thing, really keeping them separated, I feel like. And there's just not much daylight there right now. And David Montgomery, coming off 2 great matchups where he did almost nothing, not what you like to see, now heading into a much tougher matchup with Aaron Donald and the Rams. But it's hard to have anything other than mid-range flex faith in Melvin Gordon this week. Whereas David Montgomery, even though I don't know if anyone on this show enjoys watching him play football, the touches still say he's an RB2.
Dave Montgomery was bad last week. He was the RB12 overall in the week because the pass catching opportunity without Tariq Cohen.
Hayden, the spread in that game has dropped from 9 to 7. The total has dropped from 48.5 to 44. Is that very much impacted by weather or other factors as well?
Yeah, you're talking about the Chiefs Broncos game, correct?
Yeah, sorry, I am.
Yeah, that probably is definitely due to weather. I don't want to completely overreact because I don't think there's supposed to be too much wind. I'm not sure how much snow there's supposed to be. I think for this question in particular, I think that David Montgomery is seeing like low end RB1 usage, and he's like an RB2-3 flex talent. So call him RB2 the rest of the year.
All right, let's keep it going with Jonnu Smith versus Noah Fant. We don't get many tight end questions. We know Noah Fant is coming back from injury, but he'll need to be, once again, I keep repeating it with his Broncos team because they're going to have to keep up pace with this Chiefs offense. He'll need to be a pivotal factor in that Broncos offense. And we've seen Jerry Jeudy have his moments. We've seen Tim Patrick have his moments. Noah Fant, obviously his. And Pat, it's not like Jonnu Smith is a 100% clean bill of health. He left last week's game early, I believe. But when he's playing, I think both are, top 12 options, obviously.
He did. Thankfully, he was removed from the injury report, but I have them back-to-back in the rankings. I have Noah Fant 5 and Jonnu Smith 6. And Jonnu is someone I didn't really envision dropping out of the top 5 the rest of the year, even for like a really tough matchup like this week's in the Steelers, because he's just such an explosive playmaker. But Noah Fant was an ankle too. I guess Noah Fant's ankle is probably in better shape, even though it appears Jonnu avoided a high ankle sprain and is obviously playing. Noah Fant's pretty well rested at this point, and I guess I'll give the slightly healthier ankle edge to Noah Fant over Jonnu Smith.
John Daigle, it is time for those DeAndre Swift questions. Last week it was an explosion, but it was still only on about 38% of the snaps. Now, as Hayden and I were talking about prior to the show, Ian Rappaport goes on in his NFL Live hit and says, expect a massive workload, a big week for DeAndre Swift. Well, Daigle, what does that mean? And you still can't play him over someone like Allen Robinson, half-point PPR at all.
It means he needs to report better because he's never clear when he says these names. But either way, I think it is DeAndre Swift. I'm taking the touch floor.
Friendly fire.
It's a rough matchup for Allen Robinson, to be honest, against Jalen Ramsey. They will move Allen Robinson around the field, but it's a low total. It's a bad matchup. So I'm going to take DeAndre Swift in the plus matchup, also still with his pass catching role secure in that offense.
All right. Who would you start someone like DeAndre Swift over, Hayden? Is it over, let's say, the other question marks like Jamaal Williams?
Let's say Gio Bernard as well, because there are a lot of Gio questions.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question, guys. I think I have Jamaal Williams ranked the highest, followed by DeAndre Swift and then Giovanni Bernard. I think that the environment of the first two games are just better than Giovanni Bernard's. I have all three of them inside my top 15. I moved up DeAndre Swift probably like 5 or 6 spots from like RB20 to like RB14 or somewhere around that range. I think that all of them could be totally fine plays.
Pat, we get to this point here in week 7 where people have these players they draft in round 1 or round 2, like Josh Jacobs. And then, they are 4-point dogs against the Bucs defense, which is arguably the best in the NFL right now. Is that to a point where you bench someone like Josh Jacobs, who is a foundational piece of that Raiders offense, to go to Justin Jackson, who we saw have a massive workload, and now they're massive home favorites by 7.5 points and half-point PPR?
I feel like you can maybe dabble with the idea of Justin Jackson wasn't on the injury report. And like John said, he is playing, but the thing with Josh Jacobs is that, even without Vita Vea, they shut down Aaron Jones last week, the Bucs. But Josh Jacobs, you just cannot. He has the touches that you're hoping Justin Jackson's going to get. Like, you're hoping Justin Jackson gets to 20 touches, and we know that Josh Jacobs is going to get to 20 touches. And even in a rough matchup, that is enough of a decider for me. Maybe, I don't know. I was going to say maybe the Bucs will have like a hangover today going, but like maybe the run defense isn't actually as good as it still looked last week, but it probably is. But I just would rather bet on Josh Jacobs' workload today, even though I like both their workloads.
Yeah, that game, which I believe was supposed to be Sunday Night Football, has been moved to the 4:05 time slot. Bucs 4-point favorites on the road, and I think they're actually going to smash that 4 points.
Hey, but the good news is Raiders have mostly an offensive line.
Yeah.
So that's good.
This is true. Daigle, since you mentioned his name, Duncan Patterson wants to know about Gio Bernard. Joe Mixon is out this week, and by reports on Sunday morning, might be out even in week 8 as well. Gio Bernard or Adrian Peterson, which is, a name we definitely want to be talking about here in week 7.
We will take this moment to speak on the bigger picture,
Yes.
since you're definitely Duncan starting Gio over Adrian Peterson, not thinking about it. Gio is a strong RB2 locked into a role. Travion Williams is active for the first time, so maybe he gets involved. But even Samaj P. Ryan, I believe, only has 1 touch so far on the year. Like, this is Gio's backfield. This is what they've been waiting for. Gio was involved behind Joe Mixon, but it's not going to become a situation where P. Ryan becomes Gio in this role. It's strictly Bernard. So he is a strong RB2, fringe RB1, to be honest, just with the workload.
I can't be the only one that did not know that Samaje Perine was still in the NFL. Like, I maybe that's not the best thing to admit when you're hosting like 17 shows a week in fantasy football, but I did not know Samaje Perine was still an NFL football player.
You don't have to go 100 for 100 on those. I mean, if it's a Bengal, if it's a Jet, I mean, there's like a.
This is true.
Like, Chris Hogan, I think, is on the Jets. Stuff happens.
These like Jamaal Williams, Gio Bernard, like these guys are strong RB2s with locked in roles. Do not worry about them.
Hey, real quick, I'm going to interrupt you there. Hayden, I know Hayden's a Travion Williams truther. Other people in this video might not remember that. There was a heated exchange in the chat earlier this year between Hayden Winks and Nick Minzio. Just give us your Travion Williams thoughts.
3-down workload in college, very productive. The coaching staff remains somewhat high on him. He just doesn't play special teams. That's why he hasn't been active. But I still am following the money, and the money was to Gio. So that's why I have the other guys ranked ahead, and I have Gio more as like an RB2, just because there's like some range of possibilities that Travion comes there and like splits the work. But yeah, I'm not overly concerned. I think that Travion Williams is like a name to know, but not like a name to like pick up.
Correct.
Hayden, while you have the microphone, answer this one for us from Mr. Mind Messer. Start one in full point PPR. CeeDee Lamb with now Andy Dalton as his quarterback facing that Washington defensive line, Cole Beasley or AJ Dillon.
Yeah, for me, this is CeeDee Lamb. I think that Cole Beasley is like a pretty solid like wide receiver 3 flex play in PPR leagues without John Brown. But I can't play AJ Dillon unless like you're looking for like an RB3 and like standard scoring. And I think that CeeDee Lamb's just like clearly the best player. I think he might be the best slot receiver in the NFL already. And yeah, I'm going to start him.
Mute Josh.
There we go. Thank you, Eagle. I appreciate that. Thanks for helping me out. Pat, Justin Jackson, or Le'Veon Bell. We've gotten to this point with Le'Veon Bell where we have no earthly idea what his volume is going to be. But as we always joke, with CEH struggling near the goal line, maybe Le'Veon Bell in his first game here converts 2 of those goal line situations for touchdowns.
You mean just a force field between CEH and the goal line, which is a real shame. And it was an ironclad law of nature that as soon as the Chiefs signed Le'Veon Bell, CEH would go out and have a monster game. 5th most rushing yards by any player this season. So Le'Veon is just, like you said, he's basically a flex you start and hoping he gets a touchdown this week. I don't think, weird with the weather, I guess, but I don't think he'll be a huge threat to CEH's workload. And probably at best case scenario, maybe 8 to 10 carries today for Le'Veon Bell. And we like Justin Jackson to double that. So it's Justin Jackson over Le'Veon Bell.
We have I would say, easy one here. Daigle. I think at points people just need like a little pat in the back, be like, yeah, you're making the right call. From Matt Van Wormer, pick 2, DJ Moore, AJ Brown, or T. Higgins. I mean, it's the obvious DJ Moore and AJ Brown, right? You're not going to go out there and start, I don't know, T. Higgins over DJ Moore, are you?
No. And it's a good problem to have with 4-team buys now happening, because you can plug in T. Higgins as a wide receiver 3 and a starter every single week if one of these guys goes down. But they're both healthy, and you should not be as scared about that Steelers matchup as you think, since that defense has been susceptible to explosive plays. So DJ Moore and AJ Brown for sure.
Hayden, GPE on Periscope. Tyler Boyd or Chris Godwin? We had a version of this question earlier, but let's kind of recircle back on it.
Yeah, I think the Bucs receivers, this is a pretty complicated issue because both of them are dealing with injuries still. They're both playing, but I don't think that either of them are fully healthy. I think I would go Chris Godwin, but Tyler Boyd, he's in a really good spot as well. I would guess that the Bengals might pass the ball more than any team in the league this week, especially with Joe Mixon out. I think they're going to be super pass heavy, and they have been the entire season. So I think Tyler Boyd is like more of like a wide receiver 2 than wide receiver 3 this week in PPR formats. But I think that you can only rank Chris Godwin so low, so I'll go him.
Pat, let's build on that question because we have to include 2 more names from Tyler Boyd and Chris Godwin. We're adding Kenyon Drake and his volume and what he showed on Monday Night Football I believe it was against the Dallas Cowboys, and Chase Claypool. Sit 2 of those names. You're going to start any of those new 2 over the aforementioned Chris Godwin and Tyler Boyd.
I was gonna say, thank God the Bucs finally upgraded their receiver core. I mean, they just were one of the most receiver needy teams in the NFL. Yeah, I agree with Hayden. I'm going to go with Chris Godwin, even with the weirdness there. I mean, at some point, this receiver core is going to gel. I guess it's not going to gel anymore. It's just going to get thrown into chaos again next week. But Chris Godwin, is finally playing multiple games in a row. Mike Evans finally playing multiple games in a row. Hopefully, we get like some idea of where Tom Brady really wants to distribute the ball on a weekly basis, and it's a good matchup. So Chris Godwin's just kind of like the souped-up version of Tyler Boyd this week, even with the good matchup for Tyler Boyd. And then I think you have to go Kenyon Drake, just in this insane scoring environment we're going to get on Sunday night. It really hurts to bench Chase Claypool because even on 4 or 5 targets, he's already demonstrated he's the kind of guy who can win you a week on 3 or 4 catches. But yeah, I think you just got to bank those workloads of Chris Godwin and Kenyon Drake.
We still get about 20 minutes left, everyone. Keep getting your questions in. We'll continue to answer them. Leave them on Twitch, leave them on Periscope, leave them on YouTube, and we'll get to more of them as we go along. We got a quarterback question here, Daigle. We love those each and every week, and I believe Baby Santa, not the season yet, has asked us questions almost every week as well. Cam Newton or Ryan Tannehill? We know Ryan Tannehill has a very difficult matchup against his Pittsburgh Steelers defense. We also know that his left tackle is out in Taylor Lewan. Getting to know that factor will be fascinating, a development here in week 7. And Cam Newton, the offense lives and dies by him, but I am deathly afraid from watching that offense in his last 2 starts that it just has absolutely no juice to create each and every week, no matter what the opponent is.
It is Ryan Tannehill for me.
I agree.
Not only the ceiling, but I think the floor is safe as well. It's kind of hard to say whenever they're missing Taylor Lewan, and perhaps they still may go with this early down, unsuccessful approach that they've done this year. But at the same time, I trust Vrabel and Arthur Smith to the point that I think they use more play action on 1st and 2nd down this week because they know that's how they are going to exploit the Steelers defense, especially without Devin Bush in the middle of the field. So I am trusting Tannehill and the Titans offense this week.
Everyone agree with that?
Well, I got to say, I mean, for as much doom saying as you did for Cam, he still had 10 carries for 76 yards and a touchdown last week. And I have Cam and Tannehill back-to-back in the rankings. And it's such a tough matchup for Tannehill, especially his left tackle, but it is such a good scoring environment too that it's very hard to bench Ryan Tannehill. But I don't think the 49ers defense is suddenly like back despite how good they looked last week. And I mean, I consider Cam's rushing output like bankable at this point.
Ooh.
And I give Newton like the slightest of edges over Tannehill, but it's a true coin flip.
Hayden, let's keep it going on the Ryan Tannehill front. Ryan Tannehill or Justin Herbert from JT Have 00.
For me, it's Justin Herbert. I think both of them are on like the QB 1-2 borderline. Justin Herbert's like the QB 7 on a per game basis. He's getting all of his receivers back. Of course, we know that the Jaguars can't rush the passer, and I think that's the one problem with the Chargers offense is their tackle situation is so bad, but if the other team can't rush the passer, it doesn't matter. So I think that Justin Herbert, Hunter Henry, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and 1 or 2 of the running backs, I think all of them are in for a really good day.
Love it. Total of 49 in that Chargers-Jacksonville game with, again, the Chargers favored by 7.5. I mean, Justin Herbert's played some difficult defenses and has looked spectacular in moments. I wouldn't say in full games, but in moments. And so he should absolutely smash this awful Jacksonville defense.
Josh, real quick, another note on the Chargers, dead last in neutral pass rate. And we've seen the upside of this offense. If they do eventually change and become a little more pass heavy, which I know you can't assume rational coaching, especially from an RB coach. But I mean, you can't watch these games and then just say like, yeah, we have to run the ball on 68% of our 1st and 2nd down plays with Justin Herbert. I think eventually those numbers have to go up. And I think that raises the ceiling for all these guys.
It's a great point. Pat, here are some names that we have not discussed yet today. Terry McLaurin or Kenny Golladay. We know Terry McLaurin is facing this awful Dallas defense, something that we want to circle on Terry McLaurin's calendar each and every season. The issue with Terry McLaurin is I would say his quarterback play easily has limited the ceiling that we've wanted from him this year. Are you going to go as far to start him over Kenny Golladay?
I mean, this is a circle the date opponent for Terry McLaurin, but like you said, the bugaboo is when you're hoping, like, I really hope this receiver builds some chemistry with Kyle Allen today. Like your alternative is Kenny Golladay. You go with Kenny Golladay, and it's weird because Kenny Golladay hasn't had like the alpha wide receiver one usage game yet. I don't know if he's gotten above like 7 or 8 targets in a game still, but even with the Falcons reviving last week, and they did this last year where they looked like the 85 Bears, their defense for like 3 or 4 games after their season was over. Even with the Falcons defense looking better last year, I mean, you really want to get Kenny Golladay out there against the Atlanta Falcons today. And we're hoping this is where Matthew Stafford finally gets going. I mean, this should be where Kenny Golladay, who had a 100-yard game last week, should really get going. And we don't want to bench Terry McLaurin anywhere, but if you have to make this decision, it's Kenny Golladay to me.
Correct.
Okay. Deontay Johnson, Daigle, or Devin Singletary. We haven't heard anything about Devin Singletary's name, and I think that's because everyone is just confident in starting him, again, as 10-point favorites against the Jets.
It is a good matchup, but Zach Moss, who was involved on 25% of the snaps last week, I would imagine plays more. Now another week recovered from injury. Deontay Johnson, I could be wrong, but I still like him to return and lead the team in targets. I don't know what that means for his production, but I still think he leads in targets today. And so I am going back to him with confidence.
Cool. All right. Let's go to Joe Burrow versus Ben Roethlisberger. More quarterback questions. Hayden Winks from Pete Manipakone. Joe Burrow or Ben Roethlisberger, Hayden?
Another situation where both of them are on the QB 1-2 border. I think I'm going to go Big Ben. I think that he's not going to pass the ball as much, but I think he's going to be more efficient. And I think that this game has a slightly higher chance of shooting out compared to the Browns game. I don't really have that much faith in the Browns outside of Kareem Hunt and to a lesser extent, Odell Beckham. So I think I'll go Big Ben.
I mean, I know that with Big Ben, he's not the vertical passer that he once was, but this is just so much of a better team than the one Joe Burrow is going with. And at some point we care more, and like garbage time is garbage time. And Joe Burrow has put up numbers in situations. I think a lot of it is that volume, but correct me if I'm wrong, Daigle, Hayden, and Pat. Like for every other position, we care more about volume than we do the quarterback position. Like it's about efficiency. It's about going and getting early leads. And I'm not necessarily saying that the Steelers are going to do that against the Titans, but I'm just so much more confident going into these weeks with Ben Roethlisberger as my quarterback than Joe Burrow, even though when they do get down to negative game scripts, Zach Taylor does allow them to pass the football basically at will. So.
Yeah, I mean, this game is going to shoot out, I honestly think, with the Steelers and Titans.
Nice.
Too. I mean, you don't bench someone with Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool and even Juju Smith-Schuster, the dearly departed Juju Smith-Schuster and James Washington. So Joe Burrow, like he did it against this same team, but it was like the truest garbage time miracle ever. And I wouldn't even honestly consider starting Joe Burrow over Ben Roethlisberger today.
Here's a good one, Daigle. We know that Michael Thomas is out. We know that Emmanuel Sanders is out. Traquan Smith literally has no one in his way to hopefully make a play. But do you go with Darrell Henderson over him, even though we have seen that backfield be confusing? But Darrell Henderson obviously looks like the best back in the Rams offense for most of the time.
Correct. And that's why I lean Darrell Henderson. I would listen if Pat wanted to go Traquan over him. And the Panthers, remember, for as much as we make fun of their front seven, the secondary is at least playing good defense to limit explosive plays through the air. So Traquan's floor is probably higher than we perceive, but Darrell Henderson is still leading this backfield and, more importantly, getting the uber important carries inside the 10-yard line and inside the 5 over Malcolm Brown and Cam Akers, who is supposed to be more involved today. I think the Rams win big, actually, against the Bears this week. So I'm going Darrell Henderson.
Yeah, Rams are favored by 6 points right now. Again, the Bears are 5-1 and the Rams are 4-2. And I think all 4 wins that the Rams have this season are against the NFC East, so they haven't beaten anyone outside of that division. Pat?
Sam, I'm a little surprised John's upset of the week is not the Bears. It just kind of felt like, I don't know.
It all aligned. It felt like a Daigle smash spot.
The Bears are 4-1. Josh mispronounced 5. So.
Love it. All right. Let's go to Aaron620 on Twitch. Odell Beckham or Will Fuller? Hayden, which side are you leaning here?
Will Fuller. I think that Jair Alexander might cover him, but I've seen the kind of bankable production from Will Fuller, actually. And I think that he has just as big of a ceiling as Odell Beckham Jr. in a better game environment can be Will Fuller.
Pat, I'm going to put you in a difficult spot. I need to, though. And Zaza needs you to help him out win his week.
It's
CeeDee
not
Lamb.
difficult.
Okay, go ahead.
The running back touches there. Sorry, Zaza. And we saw CeeDee Lamb get to his 10 targets last week, still with Andy Dalton. But I mean, I don't know, man. Like, I'm gonna need a little bit bigger sample size for I truly regard every Cowboy the same as we were with Dak Prescott, because it was kind of a miracle for him to get to 10 or 11 targets last week. And Jamaal Williams against the Texans' run defense, you really don't think twice about that.
And Andy Dalton was 5 of 13 under pressure, and it's not like the matchup gets easier against Washington's front seven. CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper weren't involved until garbage time when they had no choice but to get the ball off. So I'm just worried about the Cowboys' offense as a whole.
Cool. Dago, back to you. Lots of questions here on Sal's roster. Gio Bernard, DJ Chark, or DeAndre Swift. Are you going to believe in your friend Ian Rappaport and ride with DeAndre Swift after his massive performance last week?
Swift could be involved more. I think he will be involved more. It makes sense, which is why it's not a report. It's just speculation. But I'm going Gio Bernard in this case because we know his role. I like Travion Williams as a former Aggie as much as anyone, don't get me wrong. But without being active throughout the year and suddenly now active, we can expect him to not get a handful of touches. So let's back off a little bit. Gio Bernard is a fringe RB1, definitely an RB2.
I feel like the one thing that Rotoworld Live and the Rotoworld Football Podcast has missed is beef. And Daigle, I appreciate what you're trying to do and generate some beef with another media.
There are so many decisions. The last thing we need are people chiming in with unofficial reports.
Okay. Let's move on. Hayden Winks, Douglas Bell, Aaron Rodgers, or Deshaun Watson. Hey, these two teams play each other. Are you going to go with the road favorite here in the Packers and Aaron Rodgers with obviously Devontae Adams in the fold? Or are you going to go with a player who continuously puts his team on his back in Deshaun Watson against a very questionable Green Bay Packers team?
Yeah, I had this decision a lot in DFS this week, and I'm going to Deshaun Watson. I think one of the things that got me over the edge here is the Packers are missing Kevin King, their corner, and their safety Darnell Savage. So the game environment's great for both of these guys. I think both of their defense are not that great. I think that Deshaun Watson just provides more with his legs. I'll take that.
Pat, can I ask you a tight end question?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Gosh.
The real PPG on Periscope, Darren Fells or Jimmy Graham?
I mean, tight end has become so dispiriting, so depressing that Jimmy Graham somehow has some of the quote-unquote best usage there is at tight end. And I guess they're going to him in the red zone. He's catching like 4 passes every week, and he's getting like 40 or 50 yards every week. And Darren Fells had the 85 yards last week. It's a good matchup, but that was still, even without Jordan Akins, I think that was still kind of an outlier performance for him. And basically, I think with Darren Fells, what you're really hoping for today is what Jimmy Garoppolo Jimmy Graham is giving you already every week. So I feel gross saying it, but I will say Jimmy Graham over Darren Fells.
Man, I would play Darren Fells over Robert Tonyan. Like, I would play Darren Fells as a top 5, top 6 tight end.
Ooh.
I mean, he's doing exactly what you want. He's just getting a few targets. He's always using the red zone, and he's running routes in a great matchup, the highest total of the week.
Love it.
It's like it's just the other guy's out. Play the starter.
Problem is that he's Darren Fells.
I mean, but Darren Fells was a top 6 tight end the past 2 weeks without Jordan Akins. So why wouldn't he be in a much better environment now? I'm playing Darren Fells everywhere. I don't like it. The tight end sucks. Just play Darren Fells. Who cares?
No matter who is right, the show is right. So I appreciate this when we cover all sides of this answer and question.
Or we're wrong because we're having a debate about Jimmy
This
Graham.
is true.
So.
We all
true.
lose in the end. We all lose in the end here in week
2020
7.
hashtag.
Hayden Lordy Lee, sit 1, Kenyon Drake, Todd Gurley, or Gio Bernard. It's so funny. I mean, Todd Gurley has not been brought up once, and it's just like a stable play.
Because he's amazing.
Yeah. For me, I'm sitting Drake. I think that there's game script issues with him the most. Todd Gurley plays no matter the game script. I think Giovanni Bernard's going to be the same situation. There's a situation where the Seahawks jump out and Chase Edmonds is playing 50% of the snaps over Drake. So for me, I think I would be sitting Drake, especially because the Seahawks secondary is terrible and their run defense isn't the worst in the league. So I think that there's reasons to believe in the passing game even more so than the rushing game for the Cardinals.
Todd Gurley, a little bit of a role change the past 2 weeks as well. 9 targets, more routes run. They are actually getting involved as like their true workhorse and scaling back Ito Smith and Brian Hill altogether.
All right, we have some viewers in a bit of a conundrum. And that starts off, Pat, with Michael Ferrara, Gardner Minshew, or Teddy Bridgewater. We've heard reports that Gardner Minshew might have like a quarter and a half left in his career with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He might get benched. And Teddy Bridgewater, he's 7-point dogs here against the New Orleans Saints.
I mean, the Jags have to find out what they have in Mike Glennon, so you understand there. I have him very close in the rankings, but Teddy Bridgewater, at this point with his weapons, against, as we've also, a defense that's been struggling, maybe, I don't know if you can even call it a sneaky shootout game that could become a shootout. Teddy Bridgewater, with those weapons, you start over Gardner Minshew. Minshew's the top 20 quarterback still this week, but feel good about Teddy.
For whatever it's worth, I had this situation in 2 of my home leagues, and I'm actually starting Kyle Allen over Minshew because the threat is real. Like, the Jaguars are just looking for a scapegoat, and It's not a good matchup. He throws one pick, he's out of there just to give them a reason to look elsewhere. So I'm worried.
Big picture look at the Jaguars over the last few seasons. It seems like at this point in the calendar, they have to find a scapegoat. A couple years ago, it was Tom Coughlin. This year, it's going to be Gardner Minshew. I just wonder when it's going to be the ownership who also own the worst team in the Premier League in Fulham and the Cons. So starting some beef with the Cons now, Daigle. All right, let's keep it moving here. Hayden, over to you. Christian Kirk or Corey Davis? A difficult one here from Brian Connolly.
I think Christian Kirk is getting back on like the wide receiver 3 flex radar after a couple of sketchy weeks to start the season, especially this week. He is one-dimensional. He's a deep threat. I think 38% of his targets are beyond 20 yards downfield. Like 98% of them are near the sideline. So those are very volatile targets. But I think the Cardinals are going to pass way more than they have in recent weeks just because they're playing the Seahawks. I do not trust Corey Davis at all.
Pat, we've gotten a lot of Deontay Johnson questions, and I totally understand it. I also think, though, we should rewind back to those opening few weeks of the season and just see, the volume hog that he was in that offense. I wouldn't go as far to bench him in favor of AJ Green, but what do you think?
Well, it is weird because he had 23 targets in weeks 1 and 2, but then he just 2 huge variables since then. 2 different injuries for him and Chase Claypool becoming the most explosive player in the NFL. I have Deontay Johnson ranked as like a low-end wide receiver 3, whereas AJ Green I still have as like a wide receiver 4. I mean, he was like a wide receiver 5 or 6 for last week, but 1 game for AJ Green heading into a good matchup. So AJ Green is back relevant. But Deontay, it's so hard to know what to expect from Deontay Johnson. But like you said, when you get 23 targets in 2 games, you take notice of that. And even with the Chase Claypool variable, I've got him back in the low-end wide receiver 3 mix.
One more question here for you, John Daigle. Matt Daniel wants to know, half-point PPR, Rashad Perryman, or Marvin Jones? Look, Marvin Jones, it felt like had been underrated for the last 4 years in fantasy drafts, and finally we all overrated him for once. Now we know all the questions everyone has out there with him and his usage and his volume and all that kind of stuff. But would you go as far to start Rashad Perryman over him this week in week 7?
I'm still, at least for one more week, playing Marvin Jones, who is still running more routes than Kenny Golladay. Of course, the issue is his targets and only seeing 10 in the past 3 games for Detroit. So I'm still going one more time through the air against this miserable Falcons defense, allowing the most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks, which should be a good game for Marvin Jones. Should be.
All right, we'll close with this one. Hayden Winks, over to you. 2 favorites of the show at points in the calendar. The Bruce 12 wants to own a half-point PPR. Antonio Gibson or Darrell Henderson? Who are you rolling with this week?
This is really tough. I think with just Henderson being on the injury report and they expect him to play and it's on Monday night and it's a tough defense, I think I'm going to give the slight edge to Antonio Gibson. I think Henderson probably has a higher ceiling between the two, but I think that Gibson's slightly safer as like a low-end RB2 this week.
Daigle, thoughts?
It's a tough one.
It would be Antonio Gibson for me. Again, Antonio Gibson getting the carries inside the 10. I like him a lot in DFS. I just like him in general this week to like Kenyon Drake was recovered and relieved by the Cowboys defense. The same here. Quickly, before we get out of here, though, I just do want to say there's tons of questions. It's just do not overreact this week. Jamaal Williams, Gio Bernard, safer plays over guys like Darrell Henderson who are mixed into timeshares, right? But then if you have like Josh Jacobs or Jamaal Williams or Gio Bernard, you go to Josh Jacobs. Just don't overthink it this week. It's okay. We're all going to make it.
we have some great resources for you. You can go check out Pat's rankings, which are on the front of the site right now. You can check out our composite rankings, which are on our season-long tools. Just go over to rotoworld.com/edge, and we have, start sit tool as well. Again, that is rotoworld.com/edge, and I think our promo code still works, FBPod10. And I want to remind you all that we will be back for the Rotoworld Football Podcast tomorrow morning, game-by-game review. Then John Daigle will be back with us on Tuesday morning with his 20-minute waiver podcast. Gentlemen, you are always the stars of the show. Thank you so much for letting me just sit back and ask you questions, and you help everyone win their week. So for John Daigle, for Hayden Winks, for Patrick Doherty, I am Josh Norris. Once again, this was Rotoworld Live, served by Applebee's. Up the Villa. Talk to y'all soon.